Hello everyone, my name's Jack Bullen. I'm the director of Woolwich Contemporary Print Fair. We've been going for 5 years now. Unfortunately, like everything this year, we've had to go virtual. So thank you for joining us virtually. I'm just on here to introduce you both to Vincent Eames and Jason Hicklin. Vincent is the director and co-founder of Eames Fine Art. That has numerous spaces, 3 or 4, in and around Bermondsey, where they are going to be doing their discussion from in the brand new print room. They've been exhibiting with us, I think this is your 3rd year now, isn't it, Vincent? Which is fantastic. And Jason Hicklin, who is sort of a fantastic printmaker and artist, and is actually head of printmaking at City and Guilds of London Art School, who actually taught me all about printmaking and is one of the reasons that this fair exists. So I'm going to leave you in their hands to talk about the print room at City and Guilds and sort of the importance of passing on these traditional skills. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass you over to you two.
Thank you, Jack. That's great. Thank you. And yes, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Eames Fine Art Print Room. As Jack says, this is our new space on Bermondsey Street. It's just down the road from our other gallery. And it's been open just under a year now. We'd originally hoped to run this discussion and demonstration from the City and Guilds print room. We did. But for COVID restrictions and also a rather flaky Wi-Fi signal, that hasn't been possible. So we are a plan B here at Eames Fine Art Print Room. Very happy to be so.
That's a good plan B.
And it's, well, it seems an appropriate place, Jason, because we've hosted you and your work here numerous times. Yeah. We actually have your work on the wall in our current exhibition, A Common Place, which is a mixed show collaboration of writers and artists that you can see through the window or online. And hopefully we can welcome you all back next week, fingers crossed, to actually look at it all in the flesh. So yes, welcome back, Jason, and delighted that I can join you here for this discussion. We do have some footage from City and Guilds print room that we're going to show you. Jason has very kindly put together some footage of teaching there that you put together a couple of days ago.
It's a very brief film. I just took a little bit of footage from the actual room one afternoon last week, and Tom at Eames Fine Art kindly has pieced it together with a bit of a voiceover. So it just hopefully just gives you a flavour of the room that we can't be sitting in this afternoon. But it just gives you a little flavour of what we're about and what we'll be talking about shortly.
So what I think we should do is, why don't we set the scene for the discussion with this film now, and then we can get on with the discussion. So I'm going to share that with you now, is the plan. And there we go.
Welcome to the Engraving School at the City and Guilds of London Art School. A room established over 100 years ago and still providing teaching in traditional techniques. Everything in an etching studio has its own place. The area is kept clean for degreasing plates, hot plates for applying hard wax and soft wax. Cleaning up area, white spirits and meths and all the rags that you'll need. Next door to that is the acid cabinet. In this case, we're using nitric acid to etch zinc plates. The dirty sink is essential. The dirty sink for washing your hands. Inking up area, the jiggers, and then the aquatint box. Applied and fused, and there's the clear sink for soaking paper. And central to the room are the 2 cast iron presses. An aquatint needs to be fused onto the plate. We do this at the City and Guilds with a gas poker. The flames held underneath the plate until the rosin starts to change colour. At this point, the aquatint rosin is fused to the plate, and the plate is ready to be submerged in the acid to etch that drawing into the metal. The only way an etching can be printed is by ink being forced into the plate. It's truly a hands-on experience. The ink is rolled onto the plate, and then the ink pushed into the metal plate with scrim or tarlatan. The circular motion is the ideal motion, and the ink finds its way below the surface of the plate into the etch marks. Once the plate has been inked up, it is ready to be taken to the press. Once the plate has been inked up, it is placed on the press along with soft felt blankets. These are to protect the paper and the plate away from the cast iron roller and the heavy amount of pressure it's about to go under. The press is wound and the impression is forced from the plate onto the dampened paper. This is the only way an etching can be printed. Roll the press to the end of the blankets. The blankets can be lifted. Then the image revealed. The tissue paper keeps the back of the paper clean, and now can be. Paper is lifted, and the impression on the paper.
Thank you.
Once the plate has been inked up, it's been put on the press bed and wound through the press. At this point, the paper can be lifted and the inked up plate revealed, and the ink has been forced from the plate onto the paper.
Okay, well, thank you. I hope we're all back and can hear us continue. Thank you for that, Jason. Thank you for putting that together.
I don't think there'll be an Oscar in it.
Well, it's a nice to have a bit of a flavour of what we're talking about, and it's very much a discussion of, well, what we call, I guess, a traditional print room, isn't it? In the City and Guilds. Is that a fair description?
I think the word tradition, I think it's as close to a hands-on experience in printmaking, especially in taglio printmaking, that one is likely to be taught in. It's a great teaching environment.
Well, we want to unpick that a bit and explain what traditional methods are, explore those ideas a bit and how important they are, why they're important, why you do it that way at City and Guilds. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so we are open to questions from you. So they use the Q&A or the chat as a way of getting questions to us, and we'll try and cover as many of those as we can. So let's start with the basics. What do we mean by a traditional method, and how is that expressed in the print room there at City and Guilds?
I think the way it's expressed at City and Guilds, I teach, and the City and Guilds is set up in exactly the same way that the Central School of Art was set up. The print room there was what we call a traditional professional studio, and I was taught by artists how to use that room. And that is something I have continued into the City and Guilds because it was the way I was taught, it's the only way I know how to teach, And from what I learned at the Central, it was the correct way to be taught.
Correct way. And we're talking acid baths, aquatint.
Absolutely.
The lovely, fantastic rush hour presses that you've got.
All the real deal. Yeah, we're working with waxes, we're working with acids, and things that a lot of art schools decided to get rid of, or print studios got rid of. They were worried about health and safety aspects, and decided, for whatever their reasons, not to have them anymore. I was lucky at the City and Guilds. I was given the chance by a principal called Michael Kenny, and approached the guy who taught me, Norman Ackroyd, about him being involved in the print room there. And Norman then suggested that I worked at City and Guilds, and we just continued this complete flow from the Central.
Sort of lineage.
It's a complete lineage
from the Central.
right back from the Central.
But I think the point to emphasise is, and I think this is fair to say, for someone who's outside of the art educational establishment, as it were, this is quite rare. What you're doing at City and Guilds, is that right?
It is quite rare in the sense that I only have to teach etching.
Yeah.
I don't have to get involved in assessments, marking work or programs. I simply walk in and my day is spent working with students on their etching problems and their etching solutions as well.
So hopefully. But it's very much a hands-on.
It is absolutely hands-on
experience.
I was
way of
once
teaching.
offered an office at City and Guilds, and I sort of said, if you give me an office, you'll find office work for me to do. I have a corner of a workbench.
You occupy a corner.
Just a corner, only a corner. And so my toolbox is there, and I loiter there and look out for what's going on in the room.
So this is very much teaching by showing, is that right? And experience. You get, we were talking earlier about you don't do handouts. You don't people start taking notes and they stop taking notes. They understand. Students understand they have to really just immerse themselves in the doing.
Absolutely, right? There's no time for notes. Once they start, you can start off with notes, but after about 20 minutes, you realise you've got to get stuck in here. And so every process we do, the student is shown how it's done. We do it with them. Then they're let free to do what they want to do with this process. They're shown the way to do it, and then they do it.
And this is artists showing the students.
Everyone who works at City and Guilds has to be a practicing artist. There is no other way you're taught. So yeah, we're all practicing artists.
Okay. How does that work then for you as an artist, as a teacher? I mean, I think you mentioned there's this wonderful quote, a duty to teach.
I think so, yeah. I remember Daniel Leibson talks about, as an architect, his duty to teach. And that's really struck a chord with me. It's something that was passed on to me, and the reason I do what I do in City and Guilds is to pass it on. It's simple as that.
And that is also something that I guess can work to your benefit in terms of finding solutions to problems with your students. That's creatively nourishing for you as well.
It's absolutely.
You learn by teaching.
I think you learn a lot. Well, I feel that I need to learn from teaching. So often a student will come with a problem that isn't a problem I would have come across, because maybe it's not a method I use, but immediately it takes you down another avenue. You're thinking, how can I help? How can I solve this problem? And then some of those solutions, I do sneak back to my studio, because some of them are good ideas.
Well, why not? I suppose
that's
the point, isn't it?
It's fair game.
But you've got this, the whole point is this room is a platform for sharing knowledge, isn't it? It's not just about instruction, it's about collaboration, about sharing ideas.
Absolutely.
And a generosity as well.
I think the way being taught at the Central, the teaching was, in the spirit, it was a generous spirit behind it. And I was always taught to be completely open about your teaching and open about your methods. If you're asked, how did you do that? Tell them everything. There's no secrets to this business. Just it's completely open. And if a student does copies exactly what I've said, it will be different. They'll have their own input into it.
That's interesting.
And because as well, it's a process. Things will happen that you cannot control. But then again, you hope for that sometimes.
But that's the beauty of printmaking, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, as someone who has only learned about this from secondhand, as it were, I've tried a bit of printmaking myself, spectacularly unsuccessfully. But there is that wonderful sort of alchemy about it, which I think is this magic that you can impart. And this sounds like the best environment to do it, if you know what I mean.
I think so. And I think what you also need, though, to do this is an infrastructure behind you.
Okay. When
I first worked at City and Guilds, I needed the trust from the principal that I knew what I was doing. And also that, again, I go have that generosity of spirit and of teaching to pass on everything I knew. And I still have that support from City and Guilds. I need to be trusted what I do.
It sounds like they give you time there as well. They let you kind of get on with it because they trust you.
They trust me, and also it's all I do. I don't know anything else. This is what I do. And so I don't feel as if it's not a great wrench from the studio. I simply walk from one studio into another.
Interesting.
There's a couple more people there than are usually in my studio. So, but I just simply walk in, and because I've laid the studio out as I was taught, my studio is laid out in the same way.
Sure. As
the central is laid out.
I'd like to come onto this in a bit more because I find that aspect of this fascinating. But there was one thing I wanted to mention about the importance of the fellowship program at City and Guilds. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, so I've been working at City and Guilds now for over 20 years, and one of the ideas Michael Kenny, Norman and myself talked about was the idea of a fellowship, which would be offered to a graduating MA student, not just from City and Guilds, but from any college in the country. And we would offer an opportunity to extend their time in a workshop and their time in a college.
Okay.
So what they have is 1 or 2 days a week where they work as a fellow alongside the tutors, in which they're taught how to teach, how to run a studio, to become a technician if that's what they want to be, and also to continue their own work. The biggest thing as a printmaker when you leave college is I haven't got a press anymore. But at the City and Guilds, on the fellowship program, they have that space.
This gives you this vital link, vital next step.
And the tools to do your job. But yeah, the next step, what do you do when you leave college? So the fellowship is that idea that we take you through this route of now really learning the business, really getting under the skin of it.
Okay.
And also continuing your own work, that's important. And being able to ask us questions about what they're doing if they need.
But it's interesting that then folds back into bringing the next generation of students along through the room, as it were.
Through the room. And everyone who now teaches at City and Guilds with me was on the fellowship program.
Okay. So
they've all come through as fellows.
It's this wonderful way of nurturing and passing knowledge on and ensuring that it continues.
Absolutely. So, what it gives us then is consistency in teaching methods. Everyone who teaches with me, I know when I'm not there, they're teaching in exactly the same way as I would teach. So the student is not confused, the student isn't lost, and isn't given misleading information where they can say to me, oh, well, so-and-so told me to do it this way. I know that's not what they were told, because we don't teach that way. So yeah, it's consistency, and I think that helps the room and it helps the students as well.
Okay, so I think that's an important point, is that you mentioned that the fellows understand how to run a room as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you explain what you mean a bit about that? I mean, because there's clearly a way of doing things in the print room.
There is. You have to have a discipline of some sort, and not a discipline that hinders you, but a discipline that helps you.
Yeah.
You know the presses are set properly. They're oiled. The pressure is correct. The pressure is never altered. The blankets are clean. The jiggers for inking up are clean as they should, enough as they can be. The ink's consistent. The hot plates are the correct temperature. The rollers are clean. The acid is fresh. All of these things.
Make
you have to have consistency, so you don't really then have to think about them.
And also the way the room is laid out, how it's organised.
The layout is crucial. The presses are central to the room, as you saw, and so we work around those presses. And often when I look up and the student's asking a question, I can probably guess what the question is by
knowing where in the room.
or if they end up if they've gone too quickly from one spot to the next, they've missed something out. You've missed something. And so it enables you to manage the room. And so the fellows...
And is this similar to the way your studio works? Absolutely. And the way Norman's studio works before? And so...
The central works. All of our studios are built on that same model. So I could probably go blindfold into Norman's studio, and I can still remember the central studio. I know what was underneath the jiggers. I know where the rollers were hanging. I know where all of that consistency is crucial.
And I guess the point to make here is that this isn't just trying to create identikit artists. You're not trying to force them into a way of working. This is a way of working that has been refined, has been found to work.
Yes.
And also this is a shared space.
Absolutely.
It's not, this is a studio that has to work for everyone. It's a place for collaboration. And if it doesn't work for a lot of people, it'll go wrong.
It goes wrong.
Yeah.
If the rollers aren't clean, the hot plates aren't clean, things go wrong. And those problems just accumulate. And so in the end, the whole studio starts to collapse.
Yeah.
So yes, you do need a discipline. Again, that discipline doesn't hinder. It just means work gets made. It's clear, and there's clarity. And economy as well. You're not wasteful. You're not wasteful.
Well, you were talking about that earlier, and I was got my ears pricked up there, because I mean,
Economy.
you've got to, but it's about reminding students that to make a living out of this, they are going to have to pay attention to things like that.
Absolutely.
You know, the most efficient way of working, the most cost-effective way of working.
I was taught by a Yorkshireman.
Ah,
there was no waste in that studio. And it's true though, when you even things like you buy a sheet of metal, you cut the metal economic way.
Yeah.
You cut paper in an economic way. You don't waste. It costs money, and you're right. If you want to earn a living, you do have to.
And this sort of studio craft is passed down from generation to generation.
When I'm printing an edition, I pride myself on the lack of waste. If there's tiny off, I know I've done my job properly, and you get a buzz from knowing it's an economic way of working. And and at the end of the day, I would like to think students who stick with us and the fellows, and they have the idea that they will one day want to make a living from this.
Yeah.
And I think that's what attracted me right at the beginning, was I saw a pathway to make a living from this.
And that's important, isn't it? Because the fellows, they're on the next step into making a livelihood out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They've gone from being a student now to being a fellow. The independence is coming their way, and then they're getting stronger, ready to then become an independent artist with their own workshop or a shared workshop.
I think that this really is bringing together the whole way that the City and Guilds Print Room manifests this ethos about a traditional way of working, a way that works, enables print to flourish, enables creativity to flourish. And it's not about creating restrictions, but it's about having processes that have to be respected. There are parameters there that have to, because there's no way around it.
There's no shortcuts. I mean, you can get quicker at things, you can get a bit more slick sometimes, but shortcuts will lead to problems. But because the room is laid out in such a way and you're taught in that way, hopefully you start to forget about the layout. You forget. It just becomes a complete natural way of working. You move in a clockwise way around the room, perhaps, or you do this in a certain order. And you're doing it in that order because I've been taught that this works, and the guy who taught me was taught that this works. It's not an obstacle.
Yes.
It's opening the door rather than slamming it in front of you.
So these actually create, they liberate you, these processes,
Absolutely.
rather than being some way of sort of constraining you.
They're not, absolutely. And what you can often see, some students, I'm not saying that all students completely fall in love with this. You can almost see it. Some are getting it, others think, I'm never putting this room. This is just mad in here. But hopefully the ones that see, you can see that they have that way of thinking, of looking for solutions. And all we're giving them is a room where those solutions can be found.
Yeah. So the solutions are there, and you're giving them the support for that as well.
Absolutely.
So there's the structure of the room, the organisation of the room,
and I'm there as a guide,
and the guidance in the room.
But I don't always have. Sometimes I have to figure out the solutions as well. You know, I have that problem in my own work, just as having a student's work. There are solutions. And
so you've learned things from your students
all the time. I think that's the only way you can keep teaching, is to be learning and be open and be honest. And if you're stumped by a problem, say, look, I need an hour to think about this. I need a cup of coffee, and I just need to think about this before I send on a certain path. And, you know, I enjoy those problems. I really get a buzz from solving those.
I guess, though, I mean, enabling your students to find the solutions themselves is what you're actually trying to teach, isn't it?
Independence.
Independence.
And I think opportunity to have that. And then, hopefully independence. And I remember the advice when I left the Central was, you're on your own now. And what that meant was, I have to make the decisions if something's etched enough, if something's printed properly. those are my decisions now, and there's no one to turn to. So as a student and as a fellow, we offer that support for a bit longer before then you're ready to go on your own and figure it out yourself.
So you should, but by going through the route, you're given every chance.
You're given absolutely, and as I said, it's complete openness. If students want to ask me any question about what I do, they can ask it, and they'll get an honest answer.
I think that the point, I guess, is that you're teaching students how to be professional printmakers, aren't you?
Yes.
And that doesn't just come down to how you manage the room or how you manage your work processes. I think from a gallery point of view, I think there's something very reassuring about if an artist has gone through a studio and has been taught by, say, yourself or Norman, or come from that lineage of respect for printmaking tradition. We know that it will be editioned properly and consistently. The print that they bring to us, it will be signed, it will be numbered properly. The record, the numbers will be, the edition numbers will be recorded properly.
Absolutely.
There will be as many artist proofs as you tell us there are. These things are important.
They are.
And because it's not just because it makes organisation much easier, it really makes the value of the edition, the integrity of the edition is sacrosanct, and it means that collectors can trust us, and they know that what they're getting from us isn't going to be, there aren't going to be double the amount in the edition as we tell them to say there aren't going to be double the amount of artists.
Or they're going to be printing 10 more next week.
Or they're going to be, yeah, I mean that, and I think that kind of care and attention is, again, it's why the touchstone of the tradition, of the traditional way of doing these things is important.
It is important. It gives you that background and that sort of understanding of what you're entering into. And at the end of the day, I like to think students one day will want to get their work seen by as many people as possible. Yeah. And then in doing that, they also hopefully would like to sell that work, because that will then pay for the next body of work to be made.
Well, that's the interesting point. I mean, you'd hope that everybody is making work to get it seen, and maybe sold. And that's where we as a gallery come in. And if you've got those basic factors in place, like a respect for the edition, a respect for the paper it's printed on.
No dirty fingerprints around here.
Yes, well, that will help.
All things like this,
I always say to a student, your first print, imagine it's the first page of your catalogue resume, and you treat your work like that from then on. You will make our job, and therefore your job.
Absolutely, and it's respect for what you do as well. Value it, and look after it, and do it. You can do it well. And that's what I think. That's what I'd like to think we do at the Guild. Is give a student that reassurance that we're doing the best for them, to put them on this pathway to exhibiting their work, and to being part of something that is been passed on for hundreds of years.
And it's not tradition for tradition's sake.
No,
it's not some sort of fetishized heritage, as it were. I guess what we're trying to get across is that this way of doing things works, and it helps you as an artist and as a printmaker.
It's not a hindrance.
It's not a hindrance.
It's not a fault.
It actually is a liberation rather than something that is there to restrict you.
I think so. And the print room, often people walk in the room and think, "Oh, it looks lovely," but you always have to say, it's not a museum. This is a working, semi-industrial room that has to work for everyone. Yeah. And it has to work. It just has to work. It's a working space, and as I said, not a museum.
And some of the equipment looks old-fashioned purely because no one's found a better way of doing it. Is that a fair way of saying?
Behind us, the Cressy that was built probably in 1800 or so. Yeah, 18. And it's built to last, cast iron. And part of the buzz of working with this stuff is the hands that have been on this machine before me. And we talked about it earlier, that it'll outlive all of us, and that we're just as guardians for a short amount of time.
Guardians is a nice way to say. Custodians.
Custodians.
Thank you for pointing this out, actually. It segues neatly into a wider point, which you very kindly, alongside Norman, have provided this style of press that we have in the print room.
Yep.
And the reason we have this is to demonstrate printmaking to collectors, to buyers. Because if there's one thing I've learned over the years as being a seller of print, trying to explain this to people is extremely difficult. And maybe it's just me, but people do tend to glaze over quite quickly when I try to get people to understand how print's made. And what we're trying to do there is link these into a wider tradition of how work is made. And the precedent, as it were, the example of print through centuries of work, and where contemporary print has a dialogue with that tradition, which I think is vitally important.
I think it's absolutely vital. And again, the room's not, the room we work on museums, and we are working with an age-old technique, but it's not, it is a contemporary technique as well. It's living, yeah. It's alive today, and hundreds of artists are working with it.
Well, I think that's an important point. Contemporary work doesn't exist in a vacuum. You know, it comes from somewhere.
Absolutely.
And I think that, you know, with print in particular, and particularly print techniques that have been passed on, it does give you this wonderful lineage, this tradition that you can respond to. Now, it's not as I say, it's not this museum piece. This is a vital thing, and vital in the way that it's actually living and vibrant. It's a tradition that artists can respond to, they can push against, they can be inspired by, but at least have a dialogue with.
And I think it's as much about learning these rules, but once you've learned them, and once you've learned it, it's then breaking them and twisting them and bending them, making it do what you want it to do. But if you go right back to when you were taught this, it won't work unless you've done the basics underneath it. It just won't. Or if it does, it's a fluke, and you don't know how the hell you do that. And that can be just as frustrating as anything else.
Well, I think that's I guess that's where you end up in a cul-de-sac if it isn't related to an actual, you can't
trace it back. You're just you're lost. You're in a vacuum somehow. So it's important to know what you've done and how you did it. Yeah. And again, consistency. I think once the studio's set up, you don't think about it. It's just the way it is. It's not getting in the car and just turning the key. I don't need to know.
You don't need to know how the engine works.
I just want it to work.
You just know it works.
And it gets you where I want to go.
And well, it works if you look after it.
It does. And again, back to the room, the presses, simple things, keeping them oiled, keeping them looked after, just all of those things right at the bottom, the core of what you do.
Well, that's. I mean, and so it's drilling those sort of fundamental basics into the students.
And then you get students who just want to go a bit further with this, a bit further, and those are the ones who become the addicts of this.
Yes. Well, that's the enduring thing, isn't it? There's this whole world of technique and technical knowledge that you could spend a lifetime exploring as well.
And you can also look back at the people who've done this before you. There's the people I was taught by, the people who taught them, but you can just follow this right back, and you start getting some greats, People.
Well, you mentioned the idea of standing on the shoulders of giants. This whole lineage and this heritage of art. I mean, who springs to mind in particular when you think about the giants that you see?
I think there's a holy trinity in etching. And you've got to go Rembrandt, Goya, and Picasso. All of them really drilled into this technique and were addicted to it. I think even Picasso, with all the other avenues. Etching and printmaking for him was absolutely fundamental. And some of the most, probably arguably some of the most crucial of his works.
I think they're vital. There's an intensity to it, because I think with Picasso and print, he's really grappling with some creative challenges.
Absolutely.
There. If you think about his lino cuts and how he responded to that with inventing the suicide cut, you've got his incredible etchings as well.
Yeah.
Sugar lift,
the sugar lift, and the way he used to get through scraper burnishes in the studio, apparently he used to get through almost 1 week, or he'd wear them out, and that's a scraping away of the plate. And Rembrandt completely took plates apart and then rebuilt them, and you can really feel that hands-on experience of what printmakers.
And so I suppose you talk about this holy trinity there as an etcher in particular. These are the ones that are sort of figureheads for you.
Those are the ones.
Something.
Absolutely, and you look at Goya's aqueducts, and they are to die for. And a man who first started to exploit that process, but at the same time, to complete a series of 80 plates is phenomenal, and have that consistency, working 300 years ago, we make 300 years.
Yeah, around that. Yeah.
But, you know, and the thing that gave him that consistency in that series of his etchings was the cast iron press.
Yeah.
That almost then opened something up for him. He realised consistency was possible. And so, you know,
and that wouldn't have happened without the Industrial Revolution.
You go right back. You know? I mean, for me, you know, that lineage and that link to industry is what grabbed me to start with, and it's never left.
So that is a telling point for you. It's that the actual mechanics of
the smell
of presses, the smell of oil,
the smell of the oil, the cast iron, the sort of, these are solid machines. Absolutely, I still have that buzz, and to own machines that do this.
Do you think this is something in common with other printmakers as well? Do you think that's something that love of the history of the making as well, and the machines that these works are made of?
You know, you think that people have had them before you, and you probably have them after you. I'm afraid, you know, it will happen. But yeah, you are tied to the machine. Without these machines, you cannot do the job. And again, that goes right back to teaching that respect. Not to take these things for granted. They need looking after, and you need to know how to use them.
So it's about looking after the machine.
You need to look after them. You look after them, they'll look after you. I always think, you know, you've got to respect them, and you can't mess around with them. You know, you can lose a finger, you can lose an arm. You know, they're to be looked after.
I think that's a point worth stressing. It would be lovely to hear from any other printmakers out there, maybe if they have a similar feeling about the machines they work with. But we can. So do send us your questions if you have any. I just wonder, this whole idea about the printmaking tradition as a creative thing to work with. I mean, you've been very generous and you've talked to us in the gallery when we did our Goya show, for example, the same about Picasso. I know Michael Barrett's been in talking about Rembrandt. Anita Klein has done wonderful talks about Picasso and Chagall. Norman Ackroyd showed us the sugar lift that he learned from Picasso's printmaker in Paris. So this is something that we enjoy in the gallery, and the way that in our program of shows, and it's not just to sell old masters, as it were, or modern masters, but it's to, as I say, show where contemporary work comes from in relation to a tradition. And I think that it helps elevate print as an art form, to show to buyers that it is linked to some of the finest, you know, artists.
Absolutely.
And it also reassures buyers as well, you know, that there is a wonderful heritage, a sort of credibility behind this art form. And
I think it appeals to people who collect too. Yeah. You can collect parts of this lineage. You can go right back to buy a Picasso. You can buy a print etching that was made yesterday somewhere. And you just feel part. As an artist, you feel part.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to, is that how this shapes you as an artist, this response to the printmaking tradition, as it were.
I mean, fundamentally, I think being taught to etch saved me. I mean, I didn't know where I was going to go really with this, working in art, being a student in an art school. The etching studio just opened everything up for me. And then the more I looked at the other artists working with this, I thought, you're part of something which is interesting, which is magical. To think that I do a sugar lift. I was taught by Norm to do a sugar lift. He was taught from Picasso's studio to do this. Picasso was taught, it just goes right back and back. You know, working with Appleton, Goya was working with, and still I can see how Goya did it, and I can be part of that. It's when I teach, become part of that.
Do you incorporate this in your teaching to students? Do you make them aware of this tradition?
I always make some sort of a joke about it. I didn't invent this. Believe it or not, I didn't invent it. So yeah, you make them realise the context that they're working in, and how this is to be respected, but not as a museum, but to be respected and worked with, manipulated. You can do what you want with it, just like Picasso made it do what he wanted it to do. You can do that as well.
I think that's it, isn't it? Is that you want to, it's a challenge as well as an inspiration. It's like, what can you add to this?
Absolutely.
I think that's when it becomes extremely exciting as well. It's like that thought of, okay, I've got my head around these skills that have been passed on to me. I know my way around the press.
Yeah.
I'm not going to kill myself in an
No.
What can I do now that can push this forward? And that's the idea again about this being a living thing.
It's a living
print
thing.
tradition. Yeah.
And it's not just walking in the studio with an idea, I'll turn this into print, 10 minutes later you have a finished print on paper. What we are really about, and I think what my work is about and what I try and convey in the teaching, it's the struggle. It's being involved in that struggle. It's really where is what you're doing. Yeah. It's not so much the finished article. It's nice to have it when it happens, but when you look back at the day or the week you've been in the studio, it was the engagement and the struggle that you had with that. And I try and really let students know that this is it. It's not.
That's valuable.
It's valuable.
That's the value. So it's not just some masochism here that it has to be hard to be valuable.
No, not at all.
You actually learn more through the
and you enjoy. I realise, it takes a while, but you do realise it's what you enjoy. I enjoy being up to my elbows in ink, and I like passing that on to the students that this is what you do. This is the struggle you're entering into. It's not easy, but God, it's rewarding when it works.
I think that is worth emphasising. I mean, I'm fascinated by print technique. I'm fascinated by printmakers. I think it's a difficult path to choose in some ways because, as we know as a gallery, print is not valued as highly as it maybe should be in this country, certainly in this country compared to other art forms. Yeah. And certainly one thing that we're very conscious of trying to do is educate buyers as to the value of print. How that is made is intrinsic to that. Absolutely. And how it is linked to a wonderful heritage is also important as well.
I think that's absolutely crucial. I mean, without that teaching, right at the very beginning, when I'm working with foundation students, for instance, you can't have that in the gallery. It would break down. You have to have it. A printmaker needs to be built ready for that gallery.
Interesting.
You're ready now. You have that background and knowledge.
And you have this wealth of precedent to sustain you as well in some of the what will be dark days when you're.
Oh, there'll be dark days.
Well, that's it.
But also, go back to you do need as an artist as well. You need a gallery that does support you in that as well. Not all galleries will get the printmaking tradition. Not all galleries will understand what an etcher goes through to make this. And to have a gallery that really does understand that and is willing to be part of what you do.
I think that's an important point. I think we certainly see ourselves as a gallery as a bridge between a printmaker and a collector and a buyer. What we're trying to do from both sides of the bridge, as it were, is that we're trying to encourage printmakers to continue work and have a platform for their work to show. But also we're trying to turn buyers into collectors. We're trying to help buyers become as addicted to printmaking as we have become ourselves, and as passionate about it as the artists that produce the work. And actually, the way to do that, we've found, is to have a program of talks, artist talks about work, about artists talking about other artists' work. So as I was mentioning earlier, so Jason talking about Picasso and Goya, etc. The idea of a print tradition being a place that you can navigate and explore with, as a buyer, as a collector, with a gallery. But the best people to guide you through that are artists, in my opinion. And I think that's really fascinating.
And I think you need a gallery, as I said, to give you that platform as well to talk about it, to talk about what you do. It is important to reach the collectors, to talk to them and to give them an insight to what goes on. But then again, the gallery also buys you time to go back to the studio where I don't have to talk every day about what I'm doing. So it does give you that time back in the studio, and you know that they'll hopefully want to see what you've done this year or next.
Well, we're always excited to see. That's good. We do have a couple of questions actually. So why don't we take a look? Now, this is a technical one.
Okay. I'll do my
So
best.
this is Jeannie. I notice you often work with 3 plates. How do you etch and ink a plate evenly? I have to say I really like the tonal quality of your work and the way you display your multi-plate prints edge to edge. Do you make your own frames, it says here?
Well, the answer to that, I do not make my own frames. I have a stock of frames where I can slip prints into them, but no, I don't make the frames. The consistency of working on 3 plates is to have 3 acid baths. Each acid bath is made at exactly the same strength on the same day, and all the plates are etched in each bath. You make a note of which plate is going in each bath, and you have that they go in at the same time. They're timed at exactly the same time, and then taken out obviously at the same time. And so we get 3 baths, give you that consistency. And printing to the edge, I agree. I really like doing full bleed printing. It creates a bit of mystery. I always think that is that an etching? Is it an etching? Is it a drawing? Because
does it draw attention to the paper as well?
I think it does.
Because we've talked about how important paper and overlooked paper is actually in the artwork.
Again, paper's crucial. Paper and ink are crucial. Good paper, you've got to use good paper. It's good ink, and you know if you skimp on the paper, quality isn't there. And also that's it. When you're working with the galleries, you've got to work with good paper, work with good ink. You get what you pay for.
Very much so, I think. And that again, respect for materials is something that I guess you'll learn at City and Guilds.
Oh, you will. You will. But yeah, well, thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you for the question. If there are any more, please send them our way. I mean, we could.
I think there's a few more on the Q&A tab.
Sorry, yeah, I can see them there. That's great. We're just through the chat here. Thank you for that. Okay. So Hannah, do students from across the foundation fine art, conservation, carving, art history courses learn etching or have the chance to?
Yes. Every student at City and Guilds will have an opportunity to work in the print studio with me and my team. Obviously, foundation all have an induction, but yeah, we've just also recently done conservation inductions. Yeah, every student has an opportunity to work in the print room.
That's great. Okay. Catherine has a question. Can you describe how you got your first press and how do you sustain your work alongside your teaching?
Wow, okay. Well, Catherine is an ex-fellow of mine who's now teaching at Putney School of Art, so he's in business. How do you manage to sustain your work? I work every day in the print studio, so I teach 2 or 3 days a week. And then work for the rest of the time in my own studio. As I said, the studios are laid down, so I don't feel as if I'm being wrenched from my studio when I go in to teach. And it's working every day. There's no such thing as a weekend. They're just working days. So yeah, working every day. And my first press was bought from, I bought this one. This is it. I bought it from the Royal Academy via Norway. He had loaned it to the Royal Academy, and I bought it from him via them. So yeah, there you go. So that's it. That's the first press. And I now the other press, my other major press I own now, I bought from Norman. And it's only been owned by 4 people since it was an industrial press. So yeah, I'm the 4th.
You're the 4th.
Yeah, so.
We have quite a few questions here, so let's get through some more. So Martin asks, can you say something about the balance between tradition and innovation and experimentation in teaching and studying? You rightly stress the tradition and continuity, but students, fellows and artists will be pushing the boundaries as well.
Yeah, I think we encourage them to push the boundaries.
I think that's what we're trying to say, isn't it? This isn't something to be slavishly adherent to.
No, not at all. It's something to be learnt and played with as well. I think it's play with it as well. Have fun with it. Really have fun with it. So I think what we teach are these traditions, but we also then encourage innovation.
I think that, again, stressing that there's something about the structure of print, though, that you have to acknowledge.
Yeah.
Or you'll make a complete mess. And it's about learning the rules in order to break them.
Absolutely. And you can at your peril miss things out and see what happens.
Victoria, as a painter who moved into print, I have a real sense of the print community and these great traditions. I wonder how these traditional, quite toxic substances that are great to use in a fully equipped studio but not so good for the environment. Do you think we as artists have a responsibility for that?
Yeah, I think we do to a degree. And this is a question I get quite often, the worry of toxicity and dangers of what we do. I again go back to teaching. I think you're taught, if you're taught properly, you're taught how to use them safely, you're taught how to use them to a minimum, you're taught how to look after yourself, and how not to just wash everything down the sink that you think will be okay. There are rules, and you need to know what you can put down the sink and not.
So this is part of it as well, isn't it? I mean, this is you're taught how to do this. I think
to look after yourself as well.
We have, on a similar subject, we have Grace here, who asking, what do you think about safe etching and modern ways of substituting methods, i.e. airbrushing acrylic aquatint instead of powdered rosin?
Okay.
Many art schools are getting rid of traditional methods to prioritise health and safety concerns. Do you think that they are equivalent processes?
I don't think, personally, I prefer the traditional methods because they work. I don't have to worry I don't have to worry about consistency. I know what I do works. I find some of the safer methods then employ chemicals at some point which I would find more dangerous than the things I work with.
Interesting.
But again, it goes back to teaching. I think there's nothing wrong with aquatint resin if you're taught how to use it properly and safely. And I know a lot of etchers who live to a great age working with this stuff. And I think, again, back to teaching, work safely. And if you can't use these traditional methods, then of course, wherever you're working, work with what you've got. But, you know, again goes back to teaching. You have to be taught properly how to use these methods. I don't think safe etching, or what they call a safe etching or non-toxic, is a shortcut. I think, again, you have to know what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you for that, Grace. We have another question here. Jason, when making prints, do you prefer to be alone in the studio in a more busy environment? That's an interesting point.
Definitely alone. So I've worked in some great workshops and studios around the country. Personally, I like working on my own. I spread out a lot. I make a mess, as it were. So no, I like working alone. I like being able to leave the studio knowing that nothing's been touched when I go in the next day. And I can work all night if I need to, or early in the morning, and everything is just as I want it to be. So again,
when do you do your best work? Are you nocturnal? Do you say?
I'm a night owl. I'm not a morning. The morning is I get the paper ready, I get the ink sorted out, I get the studio set up. I just get preparation, but after lunch is when I really.
And is there a rhythm to those processes? I guess that's a way into opening the creative mind up a bit more. I mean, that printmaking gives you that.
It does.
There's always stuff you can.
There's always absolutely, and I think I read some of the sculptor David Smith said that there's always stuff to do in the studio, and it's the sort of idea of you're oiling the presses, you're getting the paper ready, you're changing the blotters, you're polishing the metal. There's something to do before you actually start making that commitment.
And more practical than faffing about.
Absolutely, faffing about.
Like when I'm prevaricating about writing something, rearranging a sock drawer.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually
there is the equivalent.
There's the equivalent. I'm sure there is.
But yeah, no, there is. There's always something to do in the studio, and I am better once everything's settled. When I'm probably only really productive for about 2 hours a day.
But what are 2 hours? Not bad. Not bad at all.
I'm a solitary worker, I'm afraid.
Paulette has asked, this is a question about City and Guilds. Do they do any online Zoom printmaking courses at all?
Not at the moment, but it's something we have been talking about the possibility of doing. So not at the moment, but keep in touch with us. We may be doing that soon.
Okay. I mean, it seems in the light of what we've been talking about,
absolutely,
and the need to almost be present there. I mean, I'm not saying it can't work, but it's something that
it can
definitely happen.
But I think it could work in a way of seeing how it's done. But again, I would go back to the way you really want to get involved in this business is to get your hands on it.
Get your hands.
But we're definitely something we're thinking about.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. Well, maybe I should give it a try as well. I certainly can't break anything.
Maybe I should Zoom a try.
Zoom a try. I'll have to work on that. I think we're drawing to an end here. I mean, we do have some. If there's a time for a couple more questions, if there are any out there. But I just wanted to reflect on what we've discussed. I mean, I think we've covered quite a lot of ground there. And I think the point is that, again, trying to assert or remind people that the idea of a traditional method is a vibrant thing. It can be a vital in a creative, it's a creative source of, something positive to work with.
It is, and it's not, I don't, as I said earlier, it shouldn't be seen as a hindrance, this process. It should be seen as a means to production. It should be a way of making what you want to make. And it's not for everyone, but if you are in this business, you can really, really run with it. And learning in the proper way just gives you that complete backup.
And the print room at City and Guilds has really codified, that has found a way of expressing this and embodying this idea.
It has, and it's given me a way of passing on the knowledge, the little knowledge I have in this video, of being able to pass that on to people, which I normally wouldn't have. One of the questions was, I work on my own. And the only way that this process, and this magical process for me will continue, is it by being taught. If it's not taught, it dies. And that's, I think, is a problem which, I would like to see to happen.
We have some other last-minute questions coming in. Hannah, I think it's at City and Guilds, just on that point, says, Etching Fundamentals week-long course is being announced mid-December for July 2021.
There we go.
Okay, so that's the summer school. Jenny asks, Jason, do you use a sketchbook?
Yes, all of the work I make comes from drawings I make in the landscape. So I have a 2-week walk or a meandering walk sometimes, but I always take sketchbooks. I don't use a camera. So then it's a sketchbook to take them back to the studio where I photocopy every page. They're pinned up on the studio wall, and that's when I start selecting the information that builds the etchings that I make. So everything's from the sketchbook.
So it comes from the drawing.
Everything's from the drawing.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I think we have Sue just talking about how important framing of a work is. It always puzzles me that a beautiful print on fabulous paper is then covered by the mount. I think that's something you kind of...
Yeah, there's two ways. I mean, I do like seeing the edges of the paper, of course, but sometimes it's just taste. Some collectors like a window mount and they prefer it. Others want to see the edge of the paper. And I think the nice thing about this studio, the Eames Print Room studio, is they're showing work unframed. So you can see the edges of the paper.
There is a point where you have to let the work go. If it's going to sit on someone else's wall, I guess there is that point.
No, and frame, that's one of the reasons I don't frame it. It's a very personal thing.
I think that's something we've certainly learned over the years. You can have a view on it. But at the end of the day, it's going into someone's house.
Absolutely, it has to match their sofa somewhere.
Okay, indeed. And just the last comment here, I think, Martin, thank you for this. Highly recommend the City and Guilds Art School Summer School 1-week etching fundamentals, which I did in 2019. Really hands-on. There's the point we were making. Made me appreciate a huge skill, technique, and dedication which goes into printing. And he's a trustee. There you go.
Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Martin. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
And we're getting some thanks here. Thank you, Deborah, for your comments there. Loving Jason's work and thoroughly enjoyed the session. Well, I hope everyone has.
Thank you.
I know that we certainly
It's
have.
been fun.
It's been good.
It's
been good. And
enjoy the fair.
I hope that's been useful and enjoy the rest of the fair indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent, for hosting this. Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers, Jason.